Welcome back to another conversation with Carl. Today, I am joined by Grace Wong, who joined me for my panel on hunger. So, what was your takeaway after listening to that conversation?
God, I had so many takeaways, but I think the main takeaway for me was um, how these food banks have to get more and more creative to remain sustainable and to feed everybody that needs um, an extra hand in feeding themselves. It struck me because you need to eat every day, and we hear about the community coming together whenever there's a disaster, but these food banks need help every day in order to help the community. So that was one of my biggest takeaways is they have to be more creative, work more collaboratively, and inspire people to continue to volunteer and donate.
What really upset me was realizing that there are food banks in some of the wealthiest neighborhoods in the country and thinking that in the Hamptons, they are feeding a lot of people who are working in these mansions and that are opening these houses and taking care of the houses. And then as soon as the summer ends, there goes their job.
Yeah, that struck me too. And also, when you think about a food bank that has to operate in Greenwich, which director said is the richest community in the richest state in the richest country in the world, right? And they have customers. They have customers that need help. And if they do, think about, rural communities where, there isn't that infrastructure to reach out. It must be even harder. And that's something that I couldn't get over.
And the other thing that struck me was how you just mentioned this before, that they have to come up with new and creative ways. And in South Carolina, Hughes was talking about how they're letting people who are going on the hunt for food to use that food to give to people who are food insecure.
Yeah, and if you remember, they're looking at deer, and there is a abundance of wild hogs in rural South Carolina, which they are going to tap into. And if you think about it, that's all very good protein and meat, and if they can find a way to, I mean, it's difficult, frankly, to think about having to capture a wild hog, but if there's a way to do this and package the meat so that everybody who needs protein and who needs helping hand in terms of keeping their cupboard or their pantry or the refrigerators filled with good protein, this might be some way to do it. So I'm curious as to how Sai is going to make that.
And the other thing that struck me was in San Diego, they were talking about how they get 2,000 pounds a day of food from Starbucks. And that was such a staggering number. How much food must go to waste at Starbucks? They can't sell it, and it's not going to waste because it's been giving to people. It's been given to people who need it. But that's a lot of food that Starbucks would be throwing away if it was not being given away.
It's not surprising to me that we waste a lot of food. I mean, if you even think of any single family household, a lot of food does get wasted. And, if you think about chains and supermarkets and restaurants and hotels, if you go to some banquet, think of all those meals that may not get eaten or are surplus. You wonder where that goes. And I don't know if there's a concerted effort to rescue all that wasted food or that unwanted food. Because there's obviously regulations that you have to follow to make sure the food is safe to consume and is, safe to donate. And finding ways to do that on a large scale has to be a challenge. But I think it's a worthy logistical challenge to fulfill any kind of a gap that we're looking at.
Yes, and it's so interesting because when they were talking about how sometimes the farmers will have extra strawberries and they have so much that they can't give them away. So they have to figure out the logistics of to send them to other food banks. And to think about the amount of work that goes into these food banks and how much work they're doing behind the scenes to move food around the country to get food to people who need it, it's an immense task.
Right. And again, it's not it's not just one-time thing. It's not just, this one incident of, 2,000 pounds of food. It's like something that needs to be done every day and in so many places so that food doesn't go to waste and that people who need it do get, food that they could, they could use. I mean, when I think about it, it must be an overwhelming challenge because food does have a shelf life, especially good food, right? You want people not just to eat processed, boxed food and cans, but you want them to, you want people to have a healthy, balanced diet. And that does include, fruits and vegetables and those have a shelf life and how you can get that to people who need it.
If you want to watch the full conversation, you can click on the link below. It's in about 40 minutes long and there's a lot of information. Also, if you want to donate, you can go to feedingamerica.org. Let me know what you think. Put your thoughts in the comments section below. And until next time, be safe.